At my mother-in-law's birthday dinner, she stood up, raised her wine glass, and smiled like she was about to make a sweet toast. Then she said, clear as day, "Some people here don't belong in this family." Every fork stopped. Every chair went still. Everyone turned to me. My stomach tightened. I looked at my husband. He didn't meet my eyes. He reached for his glass and took a slow sip, like he hadn't heard her at all. I didn't say a word. I felt my son's hand slip away from mine. He stood up from the table, pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, and held it out in front of everyone. "She asked me to hide this," he said, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "But I think you should read it." Judith, my mother-in-law, went pale. Her smile dropped, like someone had yanked the string holding it up. For once, she didn't have a single word to say. That was the moment everything changed. But to understand how we got there, you need to know what happened before the toast, before my son made a choice that none of the adults at that table had the courage to make. Let me take you back. My name is Callie Monroe. I'm 38, a middle school teacher, a wife, and a mom of two. And for most of my marriage, I've been trying to earn a place in a family that never wanted me. When I first met Evan, my husband, he warned me his mother was old-fashioned. I assumed that meant she liked baking pies and watching reruns of black and white movies. I didn't realize it meant she believed her son should have married someone wealthier, whiter, quieter, and more submissive. Someone like Lena. Lena was Evan's high school sweetheart. His mother, Judith, adored her. She still brings her up like a fond memory, like a prize Evan dropped. I never met Lena in person, but her name was always floating in the background. When Evan and I got engaged, Judith didn't congratulate us. She said, "I thought he might come to his senses." That was my welcome into the Monroe family. For 10 years, I've smiled through every micro-cut she's thrown my way. My lasagna was too spicy. The Christmas pajamas I bought for the kids were tacky. The birthday gift I gave her 1 year was still in the wrapping the next time I visited. I'd watch her praise Evan's sister Renee for making boxed brownies but turn around and critique my homemade ones. I convinced myself that if I kept showing up, kept helping, kept saying yes, one day she'd finally accept me. Evan didn't want to see it. Or maybe he did, but he didn't want to confront her. Anytime I brought it up, he would say, "You know how she is," or "She doesn't mean anything by it." So I stopped complaining. I just worked harder. I ironed the napkins before we visited. I made sure our kids were dressed like little catalog models. I baked from scratch. I smiled until my face hurt. I made myself smaller in hopes that maybe Judith would find less of me to disapprove of. Then came the birthday dinner. Judith was turning 65, and she insisted on throwing a formal dinner at her house with the whole family. She asked me to help coordinate the meal. I spent 3 days preparing her favorite lemon herb chicken and a triple-layer chocolate cake from a recipe passed down in my family. Evan didn't say much. He assumed it would go like every other family event: awkward smiles, backhanded compliments, and the usual invisible wall between Judith and me. That night, I wore a navy dress that Judith had once complimented. I made sure my hair was smooth, my makeup soft, and my shoes matched the table decor she'd chosen. Toby, our 12-year-old son, wore a button-up and slacks without complaint. Maya, our daughter, had a little bow in her hair. We arrived 15 minutes early, as Judith had requested. She greeted Evan and the kids with hugs. I got a nod. The dining room looked like something out of a magazine. Silver chargers, linen napkins, wine glasses already filled. Judith had printed place cards with everyone's names. Evan and I weren't seated next to each other. I was across from him, beside Judith. That wasn't an accident. As the meal started, the conversation flowed around me. Judith asked Renee about her new interior design clients. She praised Evan's younger brother, Marcus, for buying a new car. She told Maya how pretty she looked. She didn't ask me a single question. I kept smiling, kept passing dishes, kept telling myself to keep the peace. But my son saw everything. Toby's eyes kept flicking to me, watching how I shrank a little more every time Judith ignored me or cut me off. At one point, he reached under the table and squeezed my hand. That was the first moment I felt like someone in the room really saw me. I tried to focus on the kids, on the food, on making it to the end of the night without another wound. But somewhere deep down, I could feel something shifting. That night wasn't going to end like the others. Something about the way Judith kept glancing at her watch, the way Evan avoided my eyes, the way Toby kept fidgeting in his seat. It all felt wrong. And then Judith stood up. She held her glass high and smiled. That's when the real story began. Dinner was almost over. The plates were mostly cleared and the second bottle of wine had made its rounds. Conversation had quieted, replaced by the soft clinking of silverware and the occasional polite laugh. Judith sat at the head of the table, surveying everything like she was queen of her little kingdom. She had that calm, smug look she wore when she thought things were going exactly her way. I was halfway through a quiet conversation with Maya about school when Judith suddenly stood up. She tapped her knife gently against her glass, and everyone turned to her. "I just want to say a few words," she said, raising her glass. She smiled sweetly, but there was something in her eyes. I saw it the moment she glanced at me. This wasn't a toast about her birthday. It was a performance, and I was the target. "I look around this table," she began, "and I see my family, my blood, my people, the ones who've always been there, the ones who know what it means to carry the Monroe name." I stiffened. Evan kept his head down, swirling his wine as if it had answers at the bottom of the glass. Judith continued, "Some of us have shared years of memories, laughs, tears, stories we still bring up at holidays, and some of us are new, newer than others, trying to fit in." The smile never left her face. Her tone stayed warm, but the air went cold. "Still," she said, looking straight at me, "some people here don't belong in this family." Her words hit like a slap. A few people chuckled nervously, thinking it was a joke, but no one really laughed, because everyone knew who she meant. All eyes shifted to me. My fork froze midair. I looked across the table, hoping Evan would jump in, that he would say something, anything, to shut this down. He didn't. He looked down and sipped his wine. I felt my throat tighten, but I held myself still. I had spent years building up walls for moments like this. I had learned how to take it, how to breathe through it, how to pretend I was unaffected. But this time felt different. My kids were watching. I glanced at Toby. He looked confused, then angry. He shifted in his chair, his jaw clenched. I could see something working in his mind, something quick and urgent. Maya reached for my hand under the table. I squeezed it gently, hoping to keep her calm, even as my own heart started racing. Judith raised her glass a little higher. "To those who belong," she said, "and to those trying their best to catch up." The toast ended. A few scattered clinks. No one said a word. No one smiled. The silence was louder than any argument. I stared at my plate. I could feel my face burning, not from shame, but from rage I had swallowed for too long. I opened my mouth to speak, but Toby beat me to it. He stood up. The room shifted. Chairs creaked as heads turned. He reached into the pocket of his blazer and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. He held it up, not saying anything at first. Judith's eyes locked on it. Her face tightened. For the first time all night, she looked nervous. Toby's voice was steady. "She asked me to hide this," he said, "but I think you should read it." The words dropped like a stone. Judith's hand reached toward him. "Toby, sweetheart, that's nothing. Just something silly. Give it to me." Toby stepped back, out of her reach. "You told me not to show it to Mom, but I think she needs to see it." I sat up straighter. "Toby, what is that?" He walked around the table and handed it to me. It was folded neatly like someone had taken their time with it. The outside was blank, but the paper was thick. High quality. Not from a child's notebook. Judith was pale now. Her eyes flicked between me and the letter. I unfolded it slowly. Inside was a printed email. The subject line read, "Evan and Lena, still hope?" My fingers went numb. I began to read the first line. "I know you still care about her. She was always the right one. I just want you to be happy, Evan." The room was silent. No one breathed. The letter was from Judith. It was addressed to Evan's ex, Lena. I kept reading. I didn't rush. I wanted every word to be heard. "I've invited you to the dinner. No one has to know. Just stop by, say hello. It might remind him what he's missing." When I looked up, Judith's expression was blank. Not sorry, not surprised, just caught. I turned to Evan. "Did you know about this?" He didn't speak. His face went white. Renee, Evan's sister, leaned forward. "Mom, are you serious? You invited Lena? Judith said nothing. Her glass was still raised, but her hand was trembling. I looked around the table at the people who had sat in silence as Judith humiliated me. No one was laughing now. This wasn't just about family politics anymore. It was betrayal, and it wasn't mine to carry alone anymore. That night, the truth cracked open. The damage was done. The room felt frozen. Judith's toast still hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear. But now everyone's attention was on the paper in my hands, the letter she had told my son to keep secret. My son, a 12-year-old boy who had been caught in the crossfire of adult cruelty. A child who saw enough to know that hiding this wasn't right. My heart broke and swelled at the same time. I looked at him, standing there, with his shoulders square and his chin high. He had done something most grown men at that table wouldn't have had the courage to do. I turned my attention to Evan. He was staring at his plate. I waited for him to say something, to explain, to defend me, to deny it, anything. He didn't move. So I spoke. I want everyone to hear this, I said. My voice didn't shake. This email was written by Judith. Talina gasped spread through the table. My sister-in-law Renee looked between her mother and brother, waiting for someone to say it wasn't true. No one did. I read it aloud, every line. I made sure not to soften it, not to protect Judith from her own words. I know you still care about her. She was always the right one. She fits in better. Just stop by the dinner, a quick visit. Maybe it will remind Evan what he's missing. When I finished, I placed the paper flat on the table and looked at Evan. Did you know about this? I asked. He finally lifted his eyes to meet mine. His mouth opened, then closed. He shook his head. No, he said quietly. I didn't. I swear I didn't. His voice cracked. I didn't know she sent that. I would never... But he didn't finish the sentence. He couldn't. Judith spoke up then, her voice sharp and cold. I was trying to help him. He's been unhappy for years. I see it. Everyone sees it. No, I said. You see what you want to see. You've never seen me. You've never even tried. Judith stood straighter. You never belonged in this family. That should have crushed me. 10 years ago it might have. But right then, in that moment, something inside me clicked into place. I know, I said, because I spent a decade trying to earn a seat at this table. I showed up. I brought food. I brought your grandchildren. I smiled when you ignored me, and I stayed silent when you insulted me. Not anymore. I turned to Toby, who was still standing, still watching everything like he didn't want to miss what happened next. Thank you, I told him, for being honest, for being brave. He gave a small nod, and I saw relief flood his face. Maya was watching too, her small hands gripping the edge of the table. Her eyes were wide but calm, like she had been waiting to see what I would do. Evan stood up slowly. Mom, he said, this isn't helping anyone. You crossed a line. You lied. You brought another woman into this house behind my wife's back? Judith looked stunned. I was trying to fix your life. My life doesn't need fixing, he said. My marriage does, and it starts with me being honest. I've been avoiding conflict for years, with you, with Callie, even with myself. I thought if I ignored the tension, it would fade, but it didn't. It got worse. He looked at me again. Callie, I didn't stand up for you. Not tonight, not before. I thought staying out of it was neutral, but it wasn't. It was a choice, and it hurt you. I'm sorry. His voice broke on the last word. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet and sincere. I'm sorry, he said again. I didn't respond right away. I needed time to decide what came next, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to keep shrinking to make space for someone else's bitterness. Judith sat down. She didn't speak again. She looked at the table, then at the floor, her expression blank and unreadable. No one picked up their glasses. No one toasted. The birthday dinner was over, not with cake or laughter, but with truth. And in that moment, the silence felt like a beginning. The room was so quiet I could hear the slow ticking of the clock in the hallway. Everyone sat frozen. The letter lay in the center of the table, like it had sucked the air out of the room. Judith was still in her chair, her expression hollow, her eyes darting between faces, searching for someone to take her side. No one did. Toby had returned to his seat beside me. Maya leaned her head gently against my arm. The kids didn't speak, but they didn't look afraid. They looked steady, steadier than the adults. I took a breath. I wasn't going to make a scene, but I wasn't going to be silent anymore either. I turned to Evan. "You let her do this," I said. "Even if you didn't know about the email, you've been letting her push me out of your life for years. You said nothing while she insulted me. You laughed when she mocked my job. You told me to let it go, over and over. You let her tell me I didn't belong." "I know," Evan said. His voice wasn't defensive anymore. It was tired, honest, and I told myself I was keeping the peace, but I wasn't. I was just choosing the easier side. Judith sat up straighter. "So now you're turning on me, your own mother." "I'm not turning on you," Evan said. "I'm facing you. You've been trying to replace my wife with someone else for 10 years. You've never accepted her. Not because she did anything wrong, but because you never wanted to let go of the idea that I should have married Lena." Judith's mouth tightened, but she didn't argue. "You keep calling it love," Evan continued. "But love isn't controlling. It isn't manipulative. You went behind our backs, tried to bring another woman into our home, into this dinner, and for what? To humiliate my wife in front of my kids? In front of my siblings? That's not love, that's sabotage." He looked around the table, then back at me. "I don't want this to be our life anymore," he said. "I don't want our kids to think this is normal. I want them to know what it looks like when you take responsibility. I'm late, but I'm here now, and I'm choosing you." I looked at him and saw something shift. For years, I had felt alone in that family. Even standing beside Evan, I often felt like I was on my own. But now he wasn't just standing there. He was standing with me. Judith shook her head. "She's turning you against me." "No," Evan said firmly. "You did that all by yourself." Renee finally spoke. "Mom, I don't even know who you are right now. You've always been hard on Callie, but this was deliberate. You crossed every line." Marcus nodded beside her. "You always say family is everything, but then you try to rip it apart when it doesn't look exactly how you want." Judith looked stunned. She had expected loyalty. She thought she could manipulate everyone into staying silent. But something had shifted at that table, and it wasn't going back. She pushed back from her chair, stood up, and said quietly, "I think we're done here." She didn't wait for anyone to respond. She walked out of the dining room, her heels clicking against the floor, and disappeared down the hall. No one followed her. I stood slowly. My hands were still shaking, not from fear anymore, but from adrenaline, from release, from finally saying the things I had swallowed for too long. I looked down at Toby. "You okay?" He nodded. "I didn't want to keep it from you." "I know," I said. "You did the right thing." "Thank you." Renee stood and began gathering dishes without a word. Marcus and his wife helped quietly, as if trying to soften the weight that still hung in the air. Evan reached for my hand and held it firmly. We didn't eat dessert. No one touched the cake I had spent hours baking, but I didn't care. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel like a guest at my own table, and I wasn't going to feel that way again. That night didn't end in celebration. It ended in truth, and that was enough. After Judith walked out, the house felt hollow. We stood in the silence she left behind, unsure whether to pretend the night was still normal or to admit that something had finally broken. Evan and I helped the kids gather their things. I thanked Renee quietly for her support, and she nodded without saying much. There was a heaviness in the room, but also a kind of relief. The pretending was over. As we drove home, Toby stared out the window. Maya had fallen asleep in the back seat with her head resting on her brother's shoulder. Evan kept glancing at me, but I didn't speak. I needed time, and he gave it to me. That night, after the kids were in bed, Evan sat across from me at the kitchen table. He looked smaller somehow. Not weaker, just stripped down. No mask, no excuses. "I should have stood up to her years ago," he said. I didn't argue. He was right. "I was afraid of disappointing her," he continued, "but in doing that, I disappointed you." "You didn't just disappoint me," I said. "You left me alone, over and over." "I know," he said, "and I hate that it took our son being braver than me for me to finally see it." I looked at him for a long time. We weren't healed, not yet, But something had cracked open that night, and in that space, something honest had finally taken root. "We need counseling," I said. "Not just for us, for the kids, too." "I'll schedule it," he said without hesitation. In the days that followed, Judith didn't call. She didn't apologize. She didn't check in with her grandchildren. That silence used to terrify me. Now it just confirmed what I already knew. She was never going to change. But I could. I stopped apologizing for things I never did wrong. I stopped bending over backward to prove myself to someone who had already made up her mind. I stopped tiptoeing through my own life. Evan kept his promise. We started therapy. It was hard, painful, uncomfortable, but we showed up, together. He started unpacking years of guilt and emotional avoidance. I started releasing the shame I had carried in silence. We began to rebuild, not the marriage we had, but something better, something rooted in honesty. One evening, a few weeks later, I was baking with the kids. Maya was frosting cupcakes while Toby tried to mix batter one-handed, clearly showing off. I was laughing, really laughing, when he looked at me and said, "You know, you don't need to be a Monroe. You're already the best one in this family." I didn't cry, but my hands froze for a second. That one sentence meant more than any approval I had ever begged for. "You're the reason we're okay," he added. "You keep everything together." I kissed his forehead and kept mixing. I didn't need Judith's validation anymore. I had the truth. I had the trust of my kids. I had a husband who was finally willing to grow, and I had myself. That dinner was never about a toast or a birthday. It was a mirror. It showed us what had been broken and forced us to decide whether we were willing to keep pretending or if we were brave enough to start again. I chose the latter. I chose me, and I've never looked back. If this story moved you or reminded you of your own strength in the face of silence, I hope you'll take a second to let me know. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment. I read everyone, and I'd love to hear your thoughts or stories. And if you want more real, raw, and honest storytelling, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for being here. Your time, your support, and your voice matter. Until next time, take care of yourself and never let anyone make you feel like you don't belong. At the family reunion, my aunt stood up from her lawn chair, pointed right at me, and said, loud enough for the whole backyard to hear, "Don't bring your fatherless kid next time." Laughter broke out, not the kind that fades quickly, but the kind that spreads. People laughing because they didn't know what else to do. Some chuckled awkwardly. Others leaned into it. I froze. I looked at my son, Malik, 15 years old, standing beside the cooler, holding a soda can he hadn't opened. His eyes didn't move. His face stayed still. Not angry, not sad, just quiet. He didn't say a word in that moment. Neither did I. I wanted to. I wanted to defend him, to defend myself. But instead, I took a deep breath and swallowed every word that rose to my throat. The night went on. People joked, ate, pretended nothing happened. But when the check came at the end of the night, Malik stood up in front of everyone and said calmly, "It's already paid for. And so is your mortgage." And just like that, every single voice went silent. I hadn't been to a family reunion in 6 years. Not since the last one, where my cousin's husband got drunk and accidentally called my son a mistake to my face. I left early and never looked back, but this time, Malik asked me to go. And when my son asks for something, I listen. "Come on, Mom, you don't have to talk to everyone," he said as we cleaned up dinner. "Just be there, for you, not for them." Malik is 15 now. He's not a little boy anymore, though sometimes I wish he still was. He's taller than me, voice deeper than I ever imagined, and he carries himself like someone who's seen too much too young. But he still calls me Mama when no one's around. I raised him alone. His father left when he was 4. One day he said he needed space. The next day he blocked our numbers. No child support, no birthday calls, no explanations. It hurt. But I learned quickly that a broken man can't build a family, so I built it myself. I worked 2 jobs most of Malik's life. Nursing assistant during the day. I cleaned offices at night. On weekends, I baked pound cakes and sweet potato pies for neighbors and coworkers. Some months, I stretched $50 like it was $500. Some nights, I cried into my pillow so Malik wouldn't hear me from the hallway, but he knew. He always knew. Still, I never let my struggle define him. He got good grades, taught himself to code online, helped elderly neighbors with yard work, never asked for much. But this year, when he asked me to go to the reunion, he didn't have to say why. He wanted me to be seen, to be respected, maybe even accepted. He wanted me to walk in as the woman who made it work, not the girl who got pregnant too young and ruined her life. So I said yes. The day of the reunion, Malik stood in the doorway holding my favorite necklace. "You forgot this," he said, clasping it behind my neck with steady hands. "Looks good." I smiled and fixed the collar of his shirt. "You clean up nice." "I got your back," he said. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until he said it. We drove across town in my old Corolla with the windows down and music low. Malik picked the playlist. Nothing loud, just smooth soul and soft drums. He didn't talk much. Neither did I. But the silence felt okay, like we were gathering ourselves before stepping into something we didn't fully trust. The reunion was held in Aunt Renee's backyard, like it always was. Folding chairs, mismatched tablecloths, and the same old radio playing 90s R&B. The grill smoke hung in the air. Kids ran around with popsicles and red-stained smiles. Everything looked familiar, but not friendly. A few relatives waved when we arrived. Some offered stiff hugs. Malik stayed close to me, his eyes scanning every face. He could feel it, too. The judgment dressed as politeness, the small talk that felt more like landmines. Aunt Renee spotted us from across the yard. She didn't smile, just raised one eyebrow and turned back to her conversation like she hadn't seen anything worth reacting to. That was her way. Always above, always watching. I tried to stay positive. I complimented someone's new hair color, helped a cousin carry plates to the table. I even laughed at a few jokes. But the whole time, I felt like a guest in my own bloodline. Malik stayed calm, polite. He answered questions when asked, nodded, smiled once or twice. But I could tell his guard was up. He's smart. He knows what people say when they think he isn't listening. As we sat down to eat, he leaned over and whispered, "You okay?" I nodded. "You?" He gave me that same calm look he's had since he was 10. "Yeah, just watching." I squeezed his hand under the table. In that moment, I felt proud, not just of him, but of myself, for everything I'd done to get us here, for showing up even when I knew it might hurt. But what I didn't know then was that hurt was coming. And it wasn't going to be a whisper behind my back. It was going to be a blow right to my face. And my son? He was ready in ways I never saw coming. The sun was starting to dip low, casting long shadows across the yard. A few kids were running around with water guns. Some of the older men were in a loud debate about football near the grill. And Aunt Renee was holding court at the long folding table like she always did. She never sat in the middle, always the end like a queen. And everyone, in one way or another, bent toward her. Malik and I found 2 seats near the edge of the group, away from the loudest voices. We ate our plates quietly, ribs, coleslaw, and macaroni that someone had definitely over-salted. Malik kept his head down, but his eyes moved, watching, listening. People made their way over, one by one. Some said hello. One cousin commented, "Wow, Malik, you got tall. You playing ball yet?" Malik just smiled. Another said, "Man, you really are his twin." Then glanced quickly at me, pretending she hadn't just brought up the father we both didn't talk about. I laughed it off. I'd gotten good at that. It was during dessert when it happened. The exact moment burned into my memory. We were finishing our food when Aunt Renee stood up from her chair and walked over, holding a paper plate stacked with banana pudding. She stopped right at our table, took a bite, and then looked straight at me. "You know," she said, voice loud and casual like it was just part of a conversation, "I don't know why you keep bringing your fatherless kid to these things." The yard quieted. Not all at once. It was like a slow turn, one person realizing what had just been said, then another, and another. She kept her smile, still chewing, still holding her plate. "This is a family reunion. I just think maybe next time you come alone, Janelle. Spare us the drama." A few people laughed. Some covered their mouths. Others looked away, but no one said anything. I sat there, stunned. My fork slipped from my hand onto my plate. I stared at her, searching her face for a hint of irony, a sign that maybe this was a sick joke, but there was none. She meant every word. She didn't care who heard. I looked over at Malik. He hadn't moved. He didn't flinch. He just sat still, his back straight, his face blank. His eyes were calm, but I saw the flicker in them, the spark of something quietly building. He didn't say a word. Not then. I wanted to speak. I wanted to tear into her, but my throat tightened. My heart pounded in my ears. I glanced around the yard. No one met my eyes. The silence wasn't protective. It was permission. They were letting it happen. I managed to say, "He's here because he's family, just like everyone else." Renee snorted and walked off without responding. She rejoined the table like nothing had happened. Malik stood up. For a second, I thought he was going to leave, and part of me was ready to follow. But instead, he walked over to the porch and sat down on the top step alone. I sat there for a moment longer, then got up and joined him. We didn't talk. He didn't look at me. I said, "You okay?" He nodded. "Yeah." She was out of line. She always is. I looked at him again. His hands were folded in his lap, but they were tight, clenched just enough to tell me he wasn't as calm as he looked. "She doesn't matter," I said. "What she said—" "She said it to make you feel small," he said, interrupting me gently. "Not me." That hit me harder than anything Renee had said. My son, 15 years old, had just seen through the whole performance. He understood that it wasn't about him. It never really had been. I realized then that Renee wasn't trying to hurt Melek. She was trying to remind me of my place, to cut me down in front of the people I grew up with, to remind them that in her eyes, I was still the girl who messed up, the girl who brought shame. But Malik saw it all. We sat on that porch step as the noise picked back up. Laughter returned. Someone turned up the music. A few kids screamed as someone pulled out a hose and sprayed the grass. The moment passed for them, but for us it stayed. Something had shifted. Something had cracked wide open, and neither of us would pretend we didn't feel it. The party didn't slow down. If anything, it got louder. People were back to cracking jokes and piling up second and third plates, but it felt like Malik and I were sitting on the edge of something the rest of the family refused to see. I thought about leaving. I really did. I looked at my purse, then at the car keys, then back at Malik. But he was still sitting straight, eyes fixed ahead, and something in his stillness told me to stay. He turned to me and asked, "You want to go?" I opened my mouth, ready to say yes, but something stopped me. I looked at him, his face calm but unreadable, and I thought about everything he had been through. Every sideways glance, every missing birthday card, every time someone asked, "Where's your dad?" As if it was a casual question, not a wound. He didn't flinch anymore, but I knew it still cut. "No," I said, "not this time." He nodded, like he already knew that would be my answer. We walked back to the main tables, the way you walk back into a room after a fire alarm, aware, but quiet. I sat back in my chair. Malik stood behind me for a while, then slowly walked over to the dessert table, like nothing had happened. He poured himself some lemonade and took one of the cupcakes I had made for the event. No one bothered him. No one said a word. I watched Aunt Renee. She was sitting comfortably, laughing about something with Uncle Rick. Her voice was high and sharp, the same voice that used to yell at me for chewing gum in her house when I was a teenager. I remembered how she used to say, I talked too much for a girl who had nothing to show for it. When Malik came back to sit next to me, he leaned in and said, "You know she's got a mortgage problem, right?" I blinked. "What?" "She took out a reverse mortgage last year and now she's behind. I heard Cousin Trish talking about it with Uncle Nate a few months ago. She's not telling anybody, but they're trying to figure out what to do." I didn't know what shocked me more, that he had paid attention or that he had remembered something so specific. "Why would you remember that?" I asked. He shrugged. "Because she looks down on people, but she's drowning too." I stared at him, trying to process what he was really saying. "And?" "I started saving," he said. "Last year. From the app I built. From that tech mentoring gig. I've been helping Miss Dorsey with her bills too, but I kept some aside, just in case." I couldn't find my voice for a second. In case of what? in case we needed to walk in somewhere and show them who we really are. I swallowed hard. You're 15. I'm ready. His voice didn't shake. His posture didn't change. He wasn't trying to impress me. He wasn't looking for approval. He had already made up his mind. I knew Malik had been doing well with his coding. He'd been building websites since he was 12, creating small tools and apps, some of which actually made money. But I didn't realize how seriously he'd taken it, or how far ahead he had been thinking. I sat there for a long moment, stunned not by what he had said, but by how sure he was about doing it. You don't owe her anything, I said. I know, he replied, but this isn't for her. That line stayed with me. He wasn't doing it to earn her approval. He wasn't doing it to make peace. He was doing it because he understood something I hadn't fully grasped. That dignity doesn't come from how others treat you. It comes from what you do when no one expects anything from you. So we stayed, we ate, we smiled, we blended in. But something was coming. And for the first time, I wasn't scared of it, because my son had already made a decision. He wasn't going to speak loudly. He was going to speak last. The sun had fully set, and the string lights around the backyard cast a warm glow over the tables. Most of the kids had gone inside. The music had softened, and the adults were easing into their second and third drinks. Conversations were slower now, more relaxed. People were starting to clean up plates and pack leftovers. Malik had stayed close to me, but not in a timid way. He moved with quiet confidence, like someone with a plan. Every now and then he glanced toward Aunt Renee's table, where she still sat with her wine glass, laughing loudly as if the earlier moment had never happened. When the server from the catering company returned with the bill, the energy shifted. Normally, at these reunions, the check would get split among the older adults. Sometimes someone offered to cover more, but it was always a bit of a show. Who would offer? Who would hold back? Who would pretend to reach into their wallet without actually contributing? This time was no different. The woman walked over and handed the bill to Aunt Renee, who always took the lead. She scanned the paper, squinted a little, and then stood up slowly, waving it in the air. "All right, y'all," she said, raising her voice to be heard. "Time to cough it up. We're all family until the check comes, right?" A few people laughed. Some groaned. A couple of uncles reached into their pockets, pulling out 20s with fake reluctance. I glanced at Malik, who was already rising from his seat. He stepped forward, past me, past our table, and stopped directly in front of Aunt Renee. Every eye turned toward him. He spoke clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You don't have to split it. It's already paid for." Aunt Renee blinked, confused. "What do you mean, it's paid for?" Malik reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a printed receipt. He handed it to her, steady and calm. "Paid in full, tip included." She stared at the paper. "By who?" I did. The silence dropped fast. A few cousins leaned in. One uncle took off his glasses to make sure he'd heard correctly. "You?" Aunt Renee said, eyebrows lifted high. "Yes, ma'am." She tried to laugh it off. "You're 15. What kind of allowance you getting?" "I don't get an allowance," Malik said. "I built an app last year that helps small businesses manage inventory. A few people liked it. They paid me to customize it for their stores. I've been saving." The room was completely still now. He turned slightly, making sure everyone could hear him. "I paid for the reunion dinner, and I also made a payment toward your mortgage." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. "I know you've been behind," he said. "I don't know all the details, but I heard you took out a reverse mortgage. I heard you were close to losing the house." Someone near the back let out a quiet gasp. Aunt Renee's hand trembled just slightly as she folded the paper. Malik didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He didn't raise his voice. He simply added, "No one should lose their home, not even someone who looks down on others." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy. The kind of silence that comes when something sacred happens. I watched her face. Her confidence cracked. She looked around for someone to step in, to rescue her, but no one moved. Not a single family member came to her defense. No one clapped either. It wasn't that kind of moment. Malik turned and walked back to our table, shoulders square, hands in his pockets. I stood up as he passed me and touched his arm. That was all I could manage. He sat down again like nothing had happened. People began to whisper, but it wasn't gossip. It was awe. My cousin Brianna leaned over and mouthed, "Did he really?" I just nodded. Aunt Renee didn't speak for the rest of the night. She sat down slowly, folding her arms. She didn't say thank you. She didn't apologize. But she didn't say another cruel word either. And for the first time in my life, she looked small. Malik didn't do it for praise. He did it because he understood something deeper than most grown people ever do. Respect isn't demanded. It's earned. And sometimes it's earned in silence, through action. That night, he didn't just defend me. He showed them who we really are. The rest of the night moved slowly, like people were still catching up to what had just happened. There was no celebration, no round of applause, just a shift, something unspoken but undeniable. Conversations turned quieter. Some people looked at Malik differently, not with pity, but with something closer to respect. Others avoided our eyes altogether. Aunt Renee stayed seated. She didn't come over. She didn't call me aside. But for the first time in my adult life, she had nothing to say. That silence felt like a victory. We didn't stay long after that. I helped a few people clear the tables. Malik offered to carry the trash bags out to the side of the house. Cousin Brianna hugged me tightly and whispered, "I should have said something when she talked to you like that. I'm sorry." I told her it was okay, but I didn't say it to comfort her. I said it because I had let go of needing anything from people who only found their voice after the moment passed. When we got in the car, I expected Malik to talk, to explain, to unpack it all. But he just sat back, buckled his seatbelt, and looked out the window. Halfway home, I said, "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he said. "You really didn't owe her anything." "I didn't do it for her." I glanced over at him. His face was steady, but I could see the weight of the night in his eyes, the restraint, the hurt, the power it took to carry himself like that. "So why?" I asked. He thought for a moment, then said, "Because you never let her define you." And I needed her to see that. I didn't respond right away. My hands gripped the wheel. My eyes welled up. I blinked them clear and nodded, because if I tried to speak, I would have fallen apart. The boy I raised had become the man I prayed for. When we got home, we didn't say much. I kicked off my shoes. Malik went straight to his room. But before he closed his door, he paused and said, "I meant it when I said I got your back." I smiled. "I know." He closed the door, and I stood there in the hallway for a long time, taking it all in. The pain, the pride, the lesson that had unfolded not just for my family, but for me too. I thought back to all the nights I spent wondering if I was doing enough, if raising a child without a father would leave a permanent crack in his foundation, if the whispers and judgment from my family would eventually shape how he saw himself. But I was wrong. He wasn't cracked. He was carved. Every hard moment, every quiet sacrifice, every choice I made to rise instead of run had shaped him into something unshakable. That night at the reunion, Malik didn't get revenge. He gave grace. And in doing so, he gave me something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not because we changed anyone, not because Aunt Renee apologized or acknowledged her cruelty, but because we didn't need her to. We left with our dignity intact. And Malik made sure the story they told about us wasn't rooted in shame, but in strength. The next morning, I got a text from Cousin Trish. "Whatever Malik did, it worked. Renee called me this morning, crying. She said nothing. Just cried. Never seen her like that." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. This wasn't about tearing anyone down. It was about showing who we really are, with no apologies and no explanations. Later that day, I looked through old photos. Pictures of Malik in second grade with a homemade science project, one of him helping me carry laundry at midnight, another where he's holding a cupcake with icing on his nose, smiling like he hadn't yet learned what the world expected of boys without fathers. And then I remembered something he said years ago after his dad missed another birthday. "It's okay, Mom. I got what I need right here." He meant me. But that night, I saw it clearly. I got what I needed too. Right here. In him. Thank you for watching our story. If this moment moved you, if you saw yourself or someone you love in it, I hope you carry this reminder with you. You don't need to shout to be powerful. You don't need approval to be whole. And grace, real grace, doesn't come from who raised you. It comes from how you rise. If this story meant something to you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment below. Tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? And if you want more real, honest stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. From me and Maliko, thank you for listening. Until next time.